the work of an Iowa-based organization, Bailing Out Benji, kind of helped spark this investigation. Can you tell me about that?
That resolution filed in King County Superior Court requires the company to pay the state $3.75 million with interest.
Bailing Out Benji regularly looks through these records of dogs' movement from state to state.
Bailing Out Benji
played a key part in unraveling a nationwide puppy scheme.
Bailing Out Benji,
an organization that's been working across the country to stop the pipeline of puppy mill breeders.
Bailing Out Benji.
I will use my voice because they don't have one, and I will keep doing it until there are no more puppy mill dogs.
Hi all, and welcome to this week's episode of Truth, Lies, and Puppy Mills. I am joined this week by my colleague Kristen, and a fun surprise, we have two of our wonderful volunteers, Allie and Sarah, joining us this week in a part 2 of talking about our online sleuth project. And in this very room today, we have Allie and Sarah, who are both online sleuths. They've been verified. They came in with March Madness, and they've been sticking with the project. So we're just here to kind of talk about their experience and see what the online sleuths have been up to. So I guess let's start off with introductions. We'll start with Allie. Allie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and like how you got introduced to Bailing Out Benji, and then also what about this project kind of drew you in?
Sure, definitely. So I think I've been a volunteer maybe since 2022, if I had to guess. What originally brought me to Bailing Out Benji was the fact that I'm from Pennsylvania. Grew up about 45 minutes from Lancaster, which, you know, is notorious for having a lot of puppy mills. Fast forward a couple years, I live in Florida now, so, you know, it was a little bit difficult to help with the Pennsylvania stuff or kind of see how I fit into, you know, the Bailing Out Benji work currently. But when you guys posted looking for help with this project, it spoke to me right away because it's, you know, it's part of my skill set, but also I track a lot of this information, at least in Florida already, not really in a, I mean, in an organized way, but not in a, you know, a scalable way, I guess. A lot of screenshots, a lot of like my Excel spreadsheet, you know, not a good way to track in the long term. So this just made a lot of sense. And it's been great so far.
Great. Thank you, Allie. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah and ask you the same question, kind of like how you got involved with Bailing Out Benji and what drew you to this online sleuth project.
So, Bailing Out Benji has kind of come through different ways, but I have done a lot of fostering dogs with mostly senior and special needs. I have fostered a few puppy mill dogs. And Mona Lisa, who's loving the spotlight here, she came from a puppy mill. And so I adopted her as my friend that fostered her, who is also in Bailing Out Benji. And I knew I wanted to be in Bailing Out Benji based on some of my experience with some of my foster dogs from the puppy mills. But I wasn't really sure what, if any, much of capacity, because I'm kind of right off of in Wisconsin, kind of in a rural area. So being able to protest or that sort of thing was a little bit tougher for me. So I thought, well, I can join and just kind of see what capacities I might be able to do. So I've done a few tables and events that way, but when this popped up, this is like right in my wheelhouse. I always take it as a challenge to try to figure out if someone posts something, I'm like, all right, let's see how much that holds up. So being able to do that, I was talking to my mom about it, and she goes, yeah, you'd be great at that. And I was like, I already know. So I'm definitely joining to do that. And it's been a great way to be able to be home and not be so close to things, to be able to add to that as well. So
Yeah, thank you. That kind of brings a common theme together. You know, Bailing Out Benji, we've got volunteers in I think about 27 states. and so you all can be kind of spread out. And so we were kind of excited to offer this as an opportunity, and it's kind of developed that we're like, oh well, for volunteers that maybe can't go out into their communities, or don't have as big of a team, like this was a great one-on project that you could do from home, or you could join in and still feel like a part of the team and the bailing out Benji efforts. So I love that for everything. And then also, I want to bring in a little joke is I think we're all kind of joking like that people who are drawn to this project are like the FBI agents, or like we're like a special unit now. So it's like this special skill set that people have, like, oh, I can find out anything about the information of this new neighbor or something or someone. You're that person that people can go to and you pull up the information. And I found with this group that we've found a lot of good FBI agents in their past life, sleuths, to join this team. I mean, Ali specifically, you just like demolish projects. It has been such a delight to have you on this team, because like you just, I don't know, it's like definitely something you were born to, I feel like, because you do so many projects. And so I was wondering from your perspective, what kind of keeps these projects like entertaining, or like what makes it like super exciting to just feel like you want to do the next project and the next project and the next project?
I would say I have a two-part answer. One thing that keeps it exciting or entertaining is, switching from state to state. Once I finish, this state, I get to move on, and the rules may be completely different. So I started with, I think, Florida and California, and then moved up to, I think, Missouri and Ohio, who have much more kind of in place at the state level. Florida has absolutely nothing at the state level. So that I look to that as, almost like a roadmap for Florida too, gives me hope that I can use, other states as kind of a model in the future. And then also, I think identifying the breeders that do need complaints filed, or even if they just reach, the monitor status, is, I wouldn't say exciting because it's not happy news, but it feels like we have the capacity to make progress. You know what I mean? We can't move forward until we at least know where the problems lie. So
Yeah, no, I love that answer, and that is kind of like why we dove into this like online market, like trying to audit it, was one that's just like it's the Wild West. Like there's not a lot known about it, and it is an interesting project because I guess as a refresher, hopefully people listened to part one of this before they came into part two. But our volunteers and what their online sleuth project is they're essentially auditing the breeders that are advertising on the puppies.com website, and kind of how this website has up to 15,000 advertisers at a time. And so how we decided to break up these projects was we broke them up by advertisers by state, and then volunteers get a little like project, so they can range anywhere from a few projects to like 9 or 10 for some of the bigger states. And so they do work through state by state their projects. And so when Ali referenced like the being exciting when it's changing states, it's exciting, but it's also interesting to see the lack of regulation in certain states, or to see like, oh well, I didn't know that, like, oh, Florida didn't register their state licensees, like, but they do USDA, so that's what we're looking for, as compared to another state like Ohio that regulates at the state and federal level. Like that's more you have to like look for, and more complexity. So I do enjoy that.
I was gonna, excuse me, I was gonna, just listening to Ali, it got me thinking, it hadn't occurred to me how this project actually helps to expand the knowledge of our volunteers. Like to me, they're just going through all these records, but by doing this, they're getting a really intimate look into the different states' laws and regulations, and what a great experience that is to be able to expand it. It's like we're creating this like super volunteer group now that is so much more familiar. And I liked your when you said you're like it's not really exciting, but this is like overwhelming work, and it sometimes is discouraging work, and it feels like we're never making a difference. And so I hear what you're saying that when you can find something that you can act on, it is that fulfilling, like, oh my gosh, finally, maybe we actually can make a difference. And so yeah, this is good. I intentionally come into these podcast episodes pretty like clueless. Um, so as you all say things, I'm like, oh, I hadn't even thought about that. So so this is fun. Thank you so much for sharing the behind the scenes on this project.
Yeah, I think I do echo that of like it is exciting to see your guys' knowledge expand, and to be able to share with you parts of the industry that like don't get talked about a lot. And even to that, like you guys figuring out things that like nobody knew. So I'm going to bring it to Sarah and ask you, you're the one who decided to kind of like figure out what the process was behind puppies.com, and like how they let people sign up and like what type of verification or lack thereof there is. So I was wondering if you could like share with us kind of what you went through and what you learned by doing that.
Yeah, I think, so I started and thought, well, you know what? I'm gonna list my Mona Lisa here, for adoption or adoption, if some people say that, on the website. I just needed a photo and I really just needed a name, an email, which I actually didn't use my own. I just made one up. I had access to it. So, there was, responding to verification that way, but that was it. Puppies.com lists, if you're state licensed or you're USDA licensed, and you need to show no proof of that. You can type whatever you would like in there. So you wouldn't even need to know the format that USDA posts their licensures, so usually there's a format that you can see and follow from that. You don't need that. You could type in, whatever numbers or letters or anything. And so that was really frustrating because I think that some people go into it and thinking, okay, well, they are, it's saying that they're USDA certified. It says that they're state licensed. And so they might feel like, wow, okay, this is a reputable breeder. This is a breeder that is, being checked and has that, that verification that way. So they might stop there. They might not actually look at those numbers and say, are those numbers actually matching up to this person? Is it a real number? Or is it licensed for someone else? And then also, should they be licensed or not? You can put on there, is it needed or not? So you can basically select and say, not needed for my state, and that will come through. But again, there is no verification on that. So if you have more than 4 breeding females in a certain state, that would require you to be state licensed. But there's no checks on that on puppies.com. So there's you by it saying, oh, not needed, you go, okay, well, then they must not need it for that state. Which again, is just totally potentially made up. And I just basically put in whatever information I wanted to on Mona Lisa. I said I made up how old she was, and I could just free text and type whatever I would like. Um, and again, no verifications. I basically made any claim I wanted to on her health or, traits or any of that. I posted a photo, and that was it. And I actually did receive at least 2 messages on her to purchase her. And of course, I didn't respond or do anything that way. But that was just the free version. So I did not pay for any premium account, which is also a potential that way for people to do on puppies.com. And it allows them to list a certain amount of puppies throughout, a certain period of time, and that way. And I just let the account elapse and I didn't do anything else with it. So it's frustrating to see, some people are, licensed in that way. And I've seen that. But of course, there's a lot of people that are not licensed that should be that are selling on puppies.com. So, yeah, it was just interesting to see how easy it was to get on there and make claims of whatever you would like.
Yeah, that was concerning when you brought that to us and went through that process, and we're like, wow, this is not talked about at all, and you can literally say anything. And like, it's easier to like figure out like USDA licensing. I say easy because it's like a public website people could go to if they know how to use it. But a lot of people don't know how to use it. It's very finicky. Like you have to type something out very specifically on the USDA website to even get a result. And then like state information, a lot of the state stuff isn't as easily accessible. And so there are only a few states that really list their licensing online. And so, yeah, people could get away with just saying whatever. And that's kind of a major thing of like, why we wanted to dive into this, like this online market, and like figure out like who's out there, because like we know there's only about like 5,000 licensed breeders at the federal and state level, and then we're seeing 15,000 advertisers on one website, and you're like, what's happening with the licensing? Why aren't they licensed? And so diving into this project and having you guys go in and like find out all this information about people and like verifying like, oh, you have a license, but from like information we gave you from our database or like any licensing lists we gave you guys while you did this project, you could say like, oh, they say they're licensed, but they're not on this list. Or, oh, okay, they are on this list. They pass the vibe for maybe the USDA or the state, but it's kind of scary when there isn't transparency. And that's one thing we talk about with like the pet store issue, the lack of transparency. But the same thing is happening in the online market, and especially in places where a lot of people are going to, but maybe not asking the full questions of like, how do I verify that license? Or do I just trust it because it says USDA and because it says state license? So thank you for going through that as another little fun little online sleuth thing.
I was just gonna say, as a consumer, I would assume that was verified. I mean, I would assume either puppies.com was verifying that, or that there was something behind the scenes where, like, when I put in my breeder name and my license number, that it's doing some kind of a cross check behind the scenes. I think it's perfectly reasonable for people to assume that. And no, people are not going to know how to go and verify. Yeah, and if you're looking for a specific dog, and you might find one that's in one state and one that's in a different state and a third that's in a third state, like you're supposed to go and figure out, like, do they need a license and all? Like, people buying dogs are not going to do that. It's wild. So yeah, that's really concerning to hear.
And that's
Thanks
where
for doing that, Sarah. That's really cool. It's a really cool little investigative thing that you did there.
Well, and that's one thing that, you could verify your ID, for example, which would cost, I would have to submit my, license or photo of that. And that way they can show like I'm a verified person. But I just find that they would be willing to do that, but yet if I were to say I'm state licensed and I would just have to upload that, that approval form, super easy. But I think that comes back to where how much some places like whoever's running puppies.com, who's ever getting the money from puppies.com, is more interested on the money of it rather than the verification and the authenticity and the words are escaping me, but essentially doing the right thing, by putting in those state and USDA license. Great. That's a great way for people to do that. But if there's no backfall on it and there's no added point for consumers, it's really not helpful. But again, would that make puppies.com more money to do all of that? Probably not. So that's unfortunate, but that's kind of the dog industry, the puppy industry, and where we're at, which is, is not necessarily looking at what's best for any of the animals or the breeders or the consumers. It's money based, unfortunately.
That brings up a question. Do we know how puppies.com makes money? Do they take a cut of sales, or is it advertising like some sites? Do we know that?
I don't know as far as I would say probably not cut on any of the sales because there was no money exchanged throughout that, so there's no way that, if this person wanted to purchase my dog, that sale would happen through puppies.com. So it would be exchanged other ways. I think the big thing is the premium. So you can list a certain amount of dogs, and once you reach over that certain limit, you either you can't do it, they cap it, or if you want to do it, you pay for a premium account, a monthly fee, I can't remember exactly, but I want to say it was like $10 a month or X amount a year. And that's one thing that I've taken a little bit of break of doing the sleuthing, and we'll be hopping back in here in a little bit. And how many of those accounts lapsed. So, for example, can I go in now and reactivate my account? So it looked like I was no longer selling under my account, but can I go back in there, list another dog? And so some of these accounts those links that we have, are they being reactivated as they get back into it, and having that lapse because
So
they're,
I've actually gone back in, Sarah, if you were wondering, and
yeah.
you absolutely can. I've found a ton. I do it in Florida, or I've gone through Florida a couple times now, because people have reactivated. And also, one thing you mentioned is that there was a cap, for, I guess, the number of dogs in a certain time frame. What I notice is there's a significant number of sellers who have multiple profiles. So they'll use a different name, but I can absolutely 100% verify it's the same. It's the same seller. They'll use the same background. They'll use the same verbiage. They'll have the same exact like little bio if they have a bio written out. There's a lot of that, which is one of the big red flags for me because they're being deceptive, and they obviously have multiple dogs available at one time.
Absolutely. Or I've seen it where that says it's one puppy, but it's actually multiple under one account.
Yes.
Which to me, I think, okay, you've got this many dogs, and not to say that I think you should be giving all your money to puppies.com and paying for the premium account, but almost like if you're not willing to pay for the premium account at X amount of money a month, man, are these dogs getting the vet care or the stuff that they need, because you're not willing to make money. You're not even willing to put a little bit more money out. So are the dogs getting what they need? Because you're trying to save money on listing on puppies.com. So that's also looking at going, oh no, what are we, yeah, this isn't I accidentally had a litter of puppies and I don't know what to do with them sort of thing. It's more of, making the most money they possibly can.
That's sadly the problems we see in the industry when you're putting that profit before the welfare. It's definitely a stop and for concern. I think that led me to thinking of a question for you guys. As you've done projects, who do you think is like selling on puppies.com in your opinion from the projects? And what I'm referencing is like, does it seem to be more unlicensed people? Does it seem to be sometimes like people maybe who did a one-off litter and then they let their account lapse? The story might be different too for like states that license breeders versus those that don't. If you did some Midwest states, you might see a lot more like licensed breeders. So I was wondering from your guys' perspective, like who do you think is kind of like selling on puppies.com?
I would say, in my experience at least, it depends on the state. Florida is a hot mess. So compared to a state like Missouri, I would have to go back and look to make a determination on a state like that. I don't want to say that it's mostly unlicensed. Don't even attempt to be licensed, because I'm not sure that's true in a couple of the states. All in all, I guess because I handled a lot of Florida and California, there are a significant number of unlicensed in those states, probably more than half.
And are those ones that should be licensed?
Yes, at least USDA wise,
Okay.
right? Florida doesn't have anything at the state level, so. But
That's
yes.
Yeah, no, that I mean that's a great perspective because it's like, well, the Midwest always gets so much heat for having so many breeders and stuff, but that's because like we have a lot of regulations at the
Hmm.
state, and if you're regulating at the state, well, they're probably also communicating to those state breeders that hey, you should be USDA if you have more than 4 breeding females and you sell sight unseen. But in states like Florida that don't have any state oversight, and it's just USDA and nobody's really in that state seeing what's happening. A lot's going unregulated for those unlicensed breeders. And so it may look like, oh, Missouri has so much more, but like Florida's a big state. They've got a lot of breeders. It just doesn't show up because they're not all USDA licensed, but like we're going in and we're finding people through the online sleuthing that like you're like, oh, well, actually, you do meet those requirements, and yet you don't have it. And so we do have to file a complaint. So that's
And
thank you guys.
yeah, and I know with Florida at least, I look at statistics like they have, last I checked, it was the fourth, I believe the fourth highest euthanasia rate in terms of our municipal shelters. And so having volunteered at two of those municipal shelters, I saw firsthand what they were dealing with. And it makes me think, what else is going on here? It's not all just people whose pets jumped over the fence. There's got to be everything kind of plays a role. There's a bigger picture here. So I think I'm a data driven person. And so this will help us capture the data in each one of these states, and try to tailor the policies so that it makes sense, so that there's, more focus on animal welfare. And, it can't continue going on like this. That's for sure.
No, I love that point because like that is we're all data nerds here. I think that's what bonds us, but data really helps us focus in on what the problems are so that we can make hopefully more effective legislation and not just be doing blanket legislation that we bring to each state. It's like, well, this is the problem in Florida, like that breeders are unregulated. Maybe we should be creating a registry for Florida to get people at least registered in the state saying that like, oh, I breed, so I should be registered. And then the step up could be like, oh, maybe the Florida Department of Agriculture could start regulating and inspecting those facilities. So I do love that point because it's something that we I think keep screaming into the void about like what other legislation would be helpful in curbing puppy mills and improving the humane treatment of animals. And that would probably start with more targeted legislation from data that we pull like this about specific states and what their problem areas are. So love that point.
I was just gonna say, also with I see a lot of unlicensed, I would say. I'm actually, I think, a bit more surprised if I see and find people and like, wow, they stated they are both state and USDA certified, and it checks out and they both match. I'm like, man, you're doing my work, like even though it's good, obviously, I'm kind of like, all right, because it's not that we want to catch people, but we want to make sure that people are doing as they should. Um, and I think that some people look at things and say, well, I'm not a puppy mill. I don't have 50, adult dogs, so I don't need to be licensed. But as we said in USDA, it's for breeding females, which I think that I find more people that have that or 5 breeding females. That just there needs to be that a little bit more oversight, so that we are making sure that the animals that are coming out of those breeding programs are being watched as far as what a good amount of spaces, and making sure that they have certain regulations as far as how early they're releasing their dogs from the puppies from the mothers, and just a little bit more of that. So I think that that's one thing that I see a little bit more, because it's I mean, you have 2 different breeds that you're doing. I mean, if you're doing golden retrievers and dachshunds, you might not be mixing them, but 2 breeding females off of both of them right there, that puts you in it. And so I think I see a little bit more of that coming through as well.
You for that. Yeah, It definitely seems like the Wild West is online. So I'm super glad that we're going through and doing this audit process. Although I'm sure the USDA and state departments, when you file the complaints, may not be the happiest, have to go in and investigate all of those. I guess could one of you like kind of explain to us kind of like how we're determining how many breeds people have, or like how we determine or what determines if someone is selling sight unseen?
How I determine how many breeds they have is just through research, through starting with their puppies.com profile, any contact information they may have on there. Some are more forthcoming than others, but I can almost always find something that will lead me to another piece of information through some more research. Some may have Facebook or social media profiles. So I scan all of that for particularly within the last year or two, and look at any breeds that they've sold. That's how I go about, because you can't just use the puppies.com profile and the breeds that they list on there, because more often than not, that's not accurate. It may be some of the breeds that they sell, but not all of the breeds.
Huh. No, that is great because yeah, because we're counting breed types or litter types available, because like yeah, if you've got like 4 or 5 different breeds, then you're like, well, you've got to at least have one breeding female. And it is funny the little rabbit hole we have to go down to, because yeah, puppies.com doesn't always list that, but also people might be cross posting on other type of marketplaces or online brokering. So that's great sleuthing. Following the dots.
Yes. And I look at the birth dates too, as I'm sure Sarah does, because sometimes there may be multiple litters of the same breed. So you can tell more about how many breeding females they may have.
Yeah, I definitely keep track. I will go through and I put a little notepad on side of my screen and I type in every date of a litter. If I have the female's name of the as well, I will make a list and I'm going, okay, well that is 8 different names of females, and I'm looking at it right here. Or and then I try to keep track of how many, does this match up with the litter dates is definitely what I'm looking at. And of course, like you said, cross-checking of, do they list on Facebook? Is there anything else popping up as far as that? But yeah, definitely looking at how that all cross-checks. But yeah, it's something that it's exciting when I find more information, because I'm like, oh, all right, here we go. Oh, you liked your own Facebook post. Here I found your Facebook, and here's your name and here's your husband and here, and so like finding that is more of like exciting, because I'm like, all right, man, you thought you were being slick, but here I am. But also it's frustrating when I can't find that. But I also get pretty sometimes frustrated where I need to step back and take a break because of what you're seeing, of seeing so many of dogs that look like the fosters that I've had, and yes, how cute they are and all of that sort of thing, but then seeing the to me seeing some of the price tags that some people are selling dogs at. There's a couple times where I've brought it up at work, or talked to other people and I said, I was doing this research um and I was finding this breeder, and guess how much they were selling this puppy for. And I say it's a lot of money. And so it's interesting to hear what people say, oh, 4 grand, 5 grand, and I keep going. And they're like, you're kidding. And I'm like, no. And it's true. I found a person that was selling I believe, I don't remember if it was a French bulldog or an English bulldog, and they were selling it for $20,000. And I couldn't, I mean, I couldn't believe it, and looking at it and thinking, man, all of the money that $20,000 could do for whoever's purchasing this animal is kind of upsetting, because there's a lot that I could do with that. And then I start to wonder of someone that spends $20,000 on a dog is probably like the person that wants to spend $20,000 on a purse. It's the status of it. Because looking at my dachshunds, you'd go, wow, wow, oh my gosh, she's beautiful, all this. And I'm going, and I adopted her for $250, you know, and that's the thing that you start to wonder on prices of what is it more for people to say they spent 20 grand on a dog than anything, because that's a whole heck of a lot of money, you know, to just get the dog. That, of course, doesn't include anything for the rest of the dog's life. So that I think was more frustrating to me on things. Like, I gotta step back for a little bit because this is a bit much.
I would have guessed that it was a French bulldog. Um, Not only in Florida, we see a ton of that here. I saw it in other states too, and the same type of terminology. It's almost, it's a marketing ploy, but they're actually breeding the dogs to develop this new rare color, this Isabella something or other, and this rope nose, which, having fostered over 100 dogs at this point, a couple of which have had that smushed, the smushed face, the breathing issue. The rope nose thing for me is animal cruelty in and of itself. So yeah, certain things like that were extremely disturbing. And then, you know, 12 grand easy for this new feature that people are looking for to tell their friends about, to just like it was a handbag. So
Do I want to ask what that means that you're talking about, the rope nose that they're breeding into these Frenchies?
it's this extra fold on top of their nose. So their breathing is even more restricted. A lot of them already need the surgery to widen the airways. So yeah, it's a roll above their nose. It's very sad, but people, I'm sure, just have not educated themselves on how that affects their breathing. And then, not to harp on Florida, but in a state like this where it's very hard for them to breathe, and then the weather on top of it really does feel cruel. It is cruel.
Absolutely. And that's the one thing that I'm in. Of course, we run into the what dog is, what breeds are popular and where they go and all of that sort of thing. And just, I mean, with any sort of breeding, I'll use my Miss Mona Lisa as an example here. She got out of the puppy mill because she was paralyzed. When I brought her to my vet, she said, "Oh my gosh, she is like the longest dachshund I have ever seen," you know? And right there, yes, absolutely. Looking at her face, looking at her coloring, that that's what they were looking for with her. I get the questions all the time of how old she is. And I go, "Oh, well, right now she's about 8 years old." And they go, "I thought she was a puppy. You're meaning she's not going to get any bigger?" I'm like, "Nope." And that right there is just, the things that people are looking for. And that's why I know that if she would not have been paralyzed, she would probably still be in that mill and still breeding. But she is no longer paralyzed. She fixed herself, thankfully, which if she was paralyzed, it wouldn't have mattered to me anyway. But she has, I mean, a whole host of, while she had been paralyzed, she also now has seizures. She's on her third dental and only 4 teeth left in 2 years, and so just knowing that this is what, it was desirable, and it was truly coloring that fad of, oh my gosh, look at this dapple coloring and look at how she looks. But I can almost guarantee you that the offspring that she had is probably having all of the exact same issues. And just like anything, it is very hard and very difficult to adopt out or find fosters even of paralyzed dogs. But dachshunds, now Frenchies now too. Frenchies are very much susceptible. I've seen quite a few Frenchies now, and I know that that's just going to continue to get worse based on the Frenchie breeding. And that's so frustrating. I wonder too how many dogs have been euthanized for paralysis, when it can live very happy lives as well. And they just go and get new ones and kind of start it over and go from there. So, and of course, there's all the dogs that have no issues that are also being euthanized. In those higher states like Florida, for example. But it's just to see the breeding that happens for pure show. Fluffy. I want a fluffy French bulldog. Okay, then I don't know how much of a French bulldog we are in anymore, but it's these fads and these things, and like I said again, of how much money can I spend on it and brag about how much money I spent on the dog. So, but yet no one's um um bragging about the, $8,000 back surgery that my dachshund might need. No one's bragging about that one, right? Because they're either not doing it, or of course they're, ashamed to have to say that they're having to pay that much money to fix a dog, but I'll brag about how much money I paid for a dog. So,
I think like as you're bringing up like fads too, it brings to me like the worry of like the online market of like if it's so accessible and so easy for people to find marketplaces like puppies.com to just post their puppies and anyone can go on there unvetted, and consumers go there looking for a puppy, trusting that licensing or trusting the information, without going and verifying, that this might breed more grounds for dogs that are suffering from these genetic issues or other issues too that just come along with, an unregulated system. So I guess that's what makes me feel a little down and sad, because the market is so big and so many animals, and it's kind of scary when you think about it and all of that, that you'd mentioned. Yeah, just get a little down about that.
well, and I also, this also sad part is that Mona Lisa did come from a USDA licensed breeding facility in Wisconsin. And the only reason she got out alive was that a person I know, she will befriend some people that run some of these puppy mills in the state of Wisconsin, and he knew that if she was in his care and did not get vet care and the inspector showed up the next day, he would be fined and he would have that, on his report. So he knew he couldn't keep her. He knew he wasn't going to get her vet care and he knew he couldn't keep her there. So the options were find someone else that will take her, which was this outlet of person that I know, or kill her. And we know that that's not and not a euthanasia sort of situation. So while the licensures are great, and does help some of that, I mean, I don't know, would he have tried to continue to breed her if he wasn't licensed? Maybe. But sometimes that's the frustrating too, is that licensure, what we've been, you've been posting about the breeder in Iowa that has canceled his license and come back in, that's not always the end of it, of the line of, but it's a starting point for us. It's a starting point to get people into those, licensures, and truly maybe not know that this is, the regulations and things that they need to be doing, and people might make those changes and actually improve their programs based on that. But unfortunately, bad people will still be bad people, regardless. So, and that's going to be, not everyone. There's always going to be those outliers. But it is frustrating when I hear sometimes people talk about, I was online dealing with a person of a breeder of designer dogs, Pomskis, of course, and she just kept saying, well, she's state licensed, and I said, yeah, but that doesn't mean what she's doing is still okay. She has, she has the, care for the dogs, great. But Pomskis are a wildly two different breeds, and talking about, is this a good idea? Not always the same thing. Different things that we're talking about. So there.
Yeah, that's a good point to highlight because, something we have to keep telling to the public is like, um, puppy mills can be licensed and they can be unlicensed, and it's not really about the license or the unlicensing, it's about the treatment and the care. Um, so yeah, that saying like, oh, I'm licensed. Well, okay, but like, what do you do at your facility? How do you treat your dogs? Uh, we need, thankfully, licensing does help with transparency. Of course, it's like it depends on the quality of inspection, the quality of the rules behind the regulations. So we can go off of that. But I think with this project, we really are trying to bring more people into compliance that we can and that should be, because that does give us eyes on those facilities and at least apply some pressure to those facilities, knowing that like somebody is coming in and going to look at your facility, and so you at least have to adhere to a certain standard. Whether we agree with the regulations or not, it's at least a bit more than what someone can decide on their own. Of course, somebody can choose to have great high standards and they do that on their own, or there can be someone who chooses to not have the best standards. But at least having a little bit of regulation and trying to bring people into compliance will also give us eyes into that facility, and we can apply pressure as that watchdog group and be like, well, just know like we're watching, and we'll look at your inspection reports and we'll see how you're doing, and we'll follow up on those violations if you're getting them. So
I would also say that as a person who's never purchased a dog besides, rescue, but if I were to, I would have to say that I had no idea that state license, USDA license, um no idea before really, I mean, getting into rescue, doing a lot of more with the fostering, knowing that, they have to be state licensed and there's certain things that way. But I think that there's a wildly unknown that there are regulations for that. Like you mentioned, puppy mills are licensed USDA. They're not totally unknown, flying under the radar in this dark area where no one knows that they exist. But just even knowing, I just sometimes think, okay, if my uncle were to go purchase a dog, does he even know that state license, that USDA licensed is a thing that he should be searching for? Because okay, I'm not going to go to a pet store because I know pet stores are bad, for example. Someone might know that, but not knowing, where do I really start to find if this is a good breeder, and that's where I really have learned a lot more with bailing out Benji and seeing that and realizing, okay, wow, there's more to it. And that, people should be looking for when deciding to purchase a puppy. So
I think that licensure discussion is good too, because also just the common consumer might assume that if a breeder is licensed by the state or the USDA, that means good. And that means like if I was doing bad things, I would have my license revoked, which I feel like is how licensure works in a lot of areas that we're accustomed to. If I'm not performing up to standards, I won't be licensed. And so I think that education as well of that the licensure really is pretty low standards. And it's a good start, and it gets them on someone's radar, and it gets them under having inspections and whatnot. But the standards are pretty low, and they can have a lot of violations on those inspections and remain licensed. So that's where I think we've been hearing a lot of praise for the search engine that we have lately, and I think that's that next step of, so to your point, Sarah, of like, do you even know that they should be licensed? And then once you've figured that out and you're like, okay, cool, they're licensed, fantastic. Now go to that search engine and look up, take the next step. And just because they're licensed, how many dogs do they have? What does their inspection history look like? And just keep educating consumers and the people who aren't in this space, who don't know these things. I think that's key to really making a change here in this Wild West, especially. I really get the impression, I've been jotting down notes as you all talk, and the internet is just and this isn't news, the internet is such a great hiding place. So whereas some of these unlicensed, not great breeders would have had a very hard time selling even through a pet store or through people coming to their property to buy dogs, internet is, yeah, it's a great place to hide.
yeah, all you need to do is find a flight nanny or a ground transporter, and you can ship anywhere. Turning to a lighter note, I think been conversing for a while, and it's been great to have you guys on and to hear your thoughts about this project. I think another thing we'd mentioned in part one of our podcast, our sleuth group chat. So I kind of just wanted to ask you guys what you think about the online sleuth chat.
I thought it was great. I mean, I think I may have been annoying people at one point when I was really um, but no, it was great just to bounce ideas off of each other. Somebody maybe working in a different state where they have more insight and into something that may be helpful. I think somebody shared that web.archives. I'm probably butchering that, but I learned about that through the chat, which I found really helpful for websites that don't exist. They're not active anymore, but there's still a record of them. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely learning the tips. The web.archive one was definitely really nice on some of them because it led me to maybe a little bit more of a phone number or an address or maybe they use a kennel name on puppies.com, but now I'm able to find a first name and kind of go off of that. And it's just interesting to see other people's ideas of what they're looking for. I know that I tried to use it in there of, you know, someone might have a Facebook page and they might have it under a kennel name, and you're just trying to figure out, okay, gosh, what is this person's name? And so I've put it in there going, go back to some of their other posts. You'll see, 5 likes, and you might see the same person's name pop up, and you go to their page um, and that's always something that I thought, yeah, that's how people get, we got to get engagement. So let me use my own Facebook to get engagement, which allows us to, be able to find out more information on them. And then just being able to use others as resources too, going, I have this person's name and it is so frustrating. I cannot figure this part out of where this is or that sort of thing. And so everyone jumps in of, okay, let me see. And, and they're able to figure it out and go there. So it's nice to have that chat that way as well.
I love that. I've definitely loved being in the group and like watching you guys develop into like your own experts on this project because you all were like learning different things and then sharing the knowledge that you were getting and little tips that you could share with somebody else on how to find something. It's been really fun. It's just been a fun little community, and to watch you guys just grow and just become complete experts on this as well. So I want you guys to hopefully realize that like you're like verifiable online sleuths, like you're doing what nobody else is doing and you're finding all these things that nobody else is. So like you're literally experts in this field right now because nobody else is doing that research. So I just wanted to say thank you for all the work that you both have done and to our online sleuth group as well. Thank you so much for everything that you guys have done. We literally could not do this project without you guys. It is such a massive undertaking. So what started out as March Madness is probably more of a long-term volunteer project now. But we really couldn't do it without you guys. And we're super excited to have this elite online sleuth group as part of our organization.
Yeah, and we've got to keep the momentum because after puppies.com, we may have more work to do.
Yeah, we actually do have some more spreadsheets of other brokering websites, other marketplaces. So I mean, if our online sleuth team is up to the challenge, we definitely have more. We have grand plans of other websites to be auditing and sleuthing on as well.
Always, we're always up for the challenge.
Love that. Love you guys. That's great.
I'm excited. I keep telling Alexis, and she's going to stop believing me at some point. But like my goal is to get to a point where I can help with this too, because I think it's fascinating, and it'll just help me learn more about the work that we do and what's going on, and build that more in-depth knowledge. From a volunteer standpoint, I love that we have this for volunteers like you all. Like I I'm a big fan of not wasting volunteers' time. Like, I don't like when we have volunteers show up to events and there's not enough for them to do, or somebody's trying to volunteer in a role that doesn't really match their skills, but they just really want to help. And so we're kind of like scrounging to find things for them to do. And those things like are actually painful to me. So to know that we have this opportunity and we have people like lined up that want to do it is these are the kinds of things that make me happy. And then just building that connection and that community with each other in this work, it's really exciting. And then as a bonus, just the changes that we're making in the industry through the project, and to see it all coming together, and you know, the internet's not getting any smaller, and yeah, it's just going to keep building and building and building. But I feel like the more we can make these connections, and you're already seeing it where some of these same people, as we start looking at other marketplaces, it's going to be some of the same people. Like it's all of these dots connect. So it seems huge, but it comes down to something a little bit more manageable. So I think it's really exciting, and I'm so glad that I'm glad the project got launched. I'm glad that it lasted more than 30 days. And that it's still going, and that we still have people like you who are still so engaged and excited to do it, because yeah, it really is a game changer. There's no way poor Alexis would be going through all of this by herself.
An impossible task that would be. I'm super glad to have such a great group of sleuths with me going through all of this. So I also want to thank you guys for joining us tonight and lending your sleuth knowledge to the world. Just thank you for coming along with this ride. I know it might be like a little like scary to come on and like talk in front of people. I guess we're on a Zoom call, but like it'll be in front of people. But I just wanted to thank you guys for coming out and sharing your knowledge and your experience with us.
Absolutely. It's something that, like I said, the more I learn about it, I'm like, okay, all right, so what about people around me, and telling people at work and just saying, there's a person that drives around with a car and it says Bulldogs on the side. Are they nice? And so just kind of, pouring through a little bit of that. But it's definitely something that I'm glad I joined Bailing Out Benji when I did. Because like I said, I was like, wow, I just don't know how much I will be able to contribute. And I was thinking of, oh man, if there was just something that I could do online of some sort of tracking or something like that, that's totally something I can do weekdays, I'm just, whatever with my dogs, and once they eat, they don't really care. So I'm like, all right, what can I do? So it's been something that I enjoyed anyway, and trying to figure it out, but it was just a really easy, like, no-brainer of, hey, do we have any people? I'm like, I didn't need to hesitate on that one, so.
I love that. I love that we could create a project that brought more people in and brought in terrific skill sets that can be used now to fight the puppy mill industry. Yeah, thank you both Allie and Sarah and Kristen for joining us on this conversation, part 2 of our online sleuth podcast series, I suppose. I just wanted to thank you all for joining us in this conversation, and just a reminder to maybe think bigger. This industry is a lot bigger than sometimes is discussed, and we're trying our best to bring as much transparency and information to the public, and we really couldn't do it without our amazing volunteers who help us shoot for the stars, literally, and get information to the public that has never before been discovered. So thank you for tuning in, and we hope that you can continue to join us in the next weeks to come.